Hi everyone, I'm Shivangani, the CEO and founder of Feather and Bone, a skincare company for mums and babies. And welcome to our first show called Labor of Love and our first panel. The reason I'm doing this is when I was pregnant with my son, I would read up on birth stories and they were pretty helpful, but one thing that I didn't have access to was be able to ask questions from the women who were sharing their stories. And so the reason we're doing this as a live event is so that soon-to-be mummies can hear all the different stories and also be able to ask questions. So I hope this is helpful. We're going to do this every month. We're recording the session, so if you can't make it, you can definitely hear the stories and reach back out to see if some of the mums, if the story connected with you, maybe you can chat with them. So we're gonna start. I'm gonna start with my story, and then we have two mums who will share theirs. So I gave birth to my son about a year and a half ago. So my pregnancy is a COVID pregnancy, which was really interesting. Pregnancy wise, it was a fairly easy one. I was 35 years old. I was pregnant with my first son, and it was fairly okay. No complaints. But my birth story was a bit of a crazy one. So I was 40 weeks and I was only 3 centimeters dilated, but I had been diagnosed with gestational diabetes at week 37. So my doctor recommended that at 40 weeks, I have me get induced. So the weekend before it was supposed to happen, my mum was in town to be there for the birth, and we decided to go get pizza. So I live in Jersey City in New Jersey, and we decided to go to Brooklyn. There are many bumps on the road, and all of that caused my water to break early, as it turns out. So I get admitted into the hospital. I'm still only 3 centimeters dilated. And usually a water breaks around 5-6 centimeters plus. And since one of the things with your water breaking is that the hospital only gives you 24 hours from when the water breaks to be able to give birth, because otherwise you can get more infections and it can make the birth process just a lot more complicated. So they kind of told me I had to go on Pitocin, which is the chemical that you use to get induced. Unfortunately, I kind of wanted to try the normal way as much as I could. It wasn't working. So I went on Pitocin, which tends to make the contractions a lot more painful. So I did end up getting an epidural, and basically around 6 hours later after that, which is I started to have an infection. I had a fever. My son's heart rate was really high. My heart rate was really high. And 2 hours after that, it was basically decided that I would have to get a C-section for the health of the baby. So 24 hours after my water breaking, I ended up having a C-section, and my son was born healthy and everything was okay. Yeah, that was my birth story. I had a really crazy postpartum. I had a spinal leak. I had a C-section infection. My gallbladder got messed up. Another story for another time. If you guys have questions on that, obviously reach out. But that was my story. And yeah, we're going to move on to my sister who's here, who was actually only 6 months behind me in terms of the pregnancy. So we were pregnant together, and yeah, she's going to share her story, which was very different from mine.
Hi. So my story is a bit different. My daughter was born roughly about a year ago. So it was in between the end of COVID, sort of like the second phase where the rules were kind of getting laxed and then they weren't. It was kind of a limbo. In terms of the actual whole pregnancy, my first trimester was actually my worst. I had a lot of nausea. I used like seasickness bracelets, which really helped. But yeah, that was probably my worst trimester. But second and third for me was actually not too bad. But at my, I think, late second trimester, like early third, when they were doing some of the scans, they realized that my child was on the smaller side, which made sense because I'm actually a little bit on the petite side. But they wanted to be safe, so they decided to do an induction at about 38 and a half weeks, 38, 39 weeks. And so that was kind of the plan going in. I had made a birth plan, and I had originally considered a birth doula, but with the COVID restrictions going on and off, I decided against it. And I decided on the induction at 38 and a half weeks. So the first stage of the induction, partly because of COVID, it was an outpatient procedure where they inserted a balloon into your vagina. And so when I went in for my procedure, unfortunately, my baby was just way too low, so they just weren't able to do the procedure without any pain management, which you couldn't get during an outpatient procedure. So they decided to just wait for me to check into the hospital, which I was doing that evening. So that evening I went in, and the doctor had checked, and she found that I was already in active labor, 5 centimeters dilated. And so I didn't really need to do the balloon procedure. They did give me a small amount of Pitocin to speed it up, considering in their opinion, I was there, might as well do it, was kind of how it went. And I had originally planned my pain medication as Nitrous, which unfortunately I couldn't take because of the COVID restrictions. You couldn't wear a mask while taking it. So I did end up getting an epidural towards the end. And yeah, for me, I was very fortunate. It was a pretty easily delivery. She was very low, and so she came out pretty quickly. I went into the hospital at 8 p.m. on a Thursday, and she was born at about 6 a.m. on the next morning. And so it was, yeah, I was lucky, maybe because I was kind of active during my third trimester still, but it went for me pretty smoothly. And I luckily as well didn't really have many postpartum complications. So that's pretty much my story. Yeah.
Thanks. So it doesn't seem like we have too many questions at the moment.
Oh no, I have questions.
Oh, you have questions. Oh, go ahead, Paula.
I mean, I had questions for you, but I'll start with your sister. So I didn't even know that there was an option to use nitrous in labor.
Yes, you can. It's very popular at birth centers, actually.
And
okay.
I also want to point out, it could be because it's a California thing, because my sister lives in San Francisco.
Okay. I mean, I don't know if it is or if it isn't. Do you know if it is? Like
No.
California?
They didn't, I mean, I was never told it was a San Francisco thing. I know it pretty widely, like a form of like pain management. I've had friends internationally to use it. And obviously it's preferred because it doesn't go across the barrier. So that's kind of why it's one that people like using. There's no real side effects. But what happened was with COVID, with nitrous, you're getting it orally through a mask. And they had this weird policy at my hospital that means you can't wear an actual mask. I don't know why that matters, but yeah, so I couldn't get it. So my obvious choice ended up being an epidural instead.
Okay. Interesting. So Shebangini, you said that you mentioned that you had pretty rough postpartum. issues. Do you think it was related to the labor? Do you think that it impacted your emotional well-being going through what you went through? I mean, first of all, did it feel traumatic for you, or did you like, how did you feel going through your labor?
I mean, the labor, I mean, everything went off plan, right? Because I did not want to get an epidural. I didn't want to have a C-section. And I didn't want to get induced. So basically, nothing the way that I planned happened. I did have postpartum depression for a few months. But I think a lot of that was just because I lost so I gained about 30 pounds during my pregnancy. I lost all of it in 2 weeks, which is pretty fast from what my OB said. And then, yeah, I mean, I think obviously I had a spinal leak, which is very rare, which is when you get an epidural, and I guess if there's a little hole left in the spine, it causes a spinal headache. So if anytime that you're in an upright position, which is basically all the time, you get this pounding headache from light, from sound, from everything. And so I think like all those little things definitely impacted just like coping with it. I mean, by 3 months, I was back to normal, but yeah, I think it all contributed in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, do you remember how you felt in the moment while you were in the hospital? And they said, "Oh, this is going to happen.
You mean
this is going to happen, and this is going to happen." Three things you didn't want to happen. Like, do you remember how you felt?
You mean for the postpartum issues?
No. Wow, it's happening.
Oh yeah, I cried. I was on the phone to my sister a lot. I was on the phone to my mom. I was on the phone to a friend who's a doula. And when they said you just have to get a C-section, you don't have a choice. I was so against it because you have to sign all the forms that the nurses had to tell me that earlier that day, like a few hours before, a baby had died, even though everything had gone right. And they kind of reminded me that the goal is to have a healthy baby and not something so sad and tragic. And that kind of put it in perspective. But yeah, I mean, I'd also just been so tired at that point, and I hadn't eaten for 9 hours too, because once you take an epidural, you can't eat. And then I had gestational diabetes, so I couldn't even have like apple juice, which is something they give you. So I think emotionally I was all over the place.
Yeah. So this question is for both of you. Before giving birth, while you were pregnant, like how much did you read about birth stories, birth plans, and like, do you think it contributed to your expectations? Were you comparing yourself or hoping you could emulate a certain birth story that you had heard? You know, what played into your birth plan? Like, why did you feel that, no, I don't want this, I don't want that, and I don't want this? Like, do you recall like what kind of like shaped your birth plan, why you went in that direction?
I think I just wanted it. Our mom did it basically 3 times unmedicated without anything. So I think that was, at least for me, that was kind of what it was. I did read about birth stories, and most of the ones I read were really happy. And I remember this one video we saw on YouTube of a woman in Australia just going into a lake and giving birth. And so we thought, hey, if she can, there was nobody there. But she just went and gave birth. So I thought, okay, if she can do it, we're in a hospital, we'll be fine.
I'm a bit of a planner, so I was a little different. I did classes, virtual at COVID, so virtual classes. The classes were helpful because they gave me a lot of knowledge. My doctor had told me to make a birth plan and I didn't know how to begin. So the classes kind of helped me know what the different pain management options were, what is involved in an induction, like what can go wrong, and like what are the scenarios, because I like having a lot of information ahead of time. So that kind of shaped my birth plan. I was a little bit, I understand that you kind of, things can go wrong. So I kind of had a tentative plan, but it wasn't a hard, like, if this doesn't work out, like, it's going to be hard. Like with pain management, it was in my plan. I wanted to do nitrous, but I was very open to an epidural. I considered a birth doula and was like I'd spoken to a lot of friends who had birth doulas, and I did understand why it would be beneficial, which did happen to me, where like at hospitals, like they tend to bulldoze you a little bit. I find that like, you give them your birth plan, especially if it's not the doctor that you've been with, your OB who's doing it, they kind of tend to disregard it and kind of go with what they think is the right way. And so you do get a little bit bulldozed. So having a doula there can be beneficial because they can kind of say what you want, because you're kind of going through everything, all the hormones, you're a bit freaked out. And so it's hard to kind of argue with a doctor at that stage. So I know with friends, they've said it's been helpful to have that kind of advocate. I didn't really take one. And so my husband didn't really have a clue what was going on. So I kind of, we went with a bit of the flow. And so, like one of the things on mine was I didn't want my water to be broken unless we had no choice on my birth plan. And the doctor just came in and she did it without even telling me she was doing it. She kind of just did it. And, after the effects, I was like, oh, okay, you did it. And she was like, we just want to speed this along, so it was it wasn't really followed, but having done the research, I at least had an understanding of what was going on. So I didn't feel like, oh, this is also new to me. So I liked doing the classes and talking to people, looking at a few friends' birth plans and things like that. And so it helped calm me in the situation, which was kind of nice. And like I packed like a hospital bag and I got like a list of things. I'm a list person of like what to bring for my bag, my baby's bag, my husband's bag. So I like doing that. And so I liked having that. So I felt like helped me feel calmer, like what fruits and things to bring, all of these things. So I like that. And it definitely, I think, helped me at the hospital, especially with my husband freaking out a lot.
Yeah, nice.
So yeah, for me, that was kind of the pain management. I would have liked to have not done an epidural, but I wasn't completely against it either. I was very much like, I'll do, or at the point I feel like I need, and that's kind of what I'll do. So
yeah. So are you saying that the doctor that took care of you through, all the prenatal stuff is not the doctor that delivered your child?
No, because the plan had been, my doctor had said that because it was my first delivery and I was a bit on the smaller side, they kind of thought I'd check in on a Thursday, and she was like, people who are smaller, they tend to take longer to deliver. So the idea was that I probably wouldn't be able to deliver until Saturday, and she was going to be like on the clock on Saturday and Sunday. No one had thought that she would come out so smoothly, pretty much. And so no one had anticipated that I would give birth on Friday.
Wow.
So it was not my doctor. She came in obviously on Saturday to just check in and everything. But yeah, I mean, there's no guarantees that your doctor is the one that will do it, even if you plan the induction. So
Paula, in an effort to keep the time, maybe we can hear your story and then we can go back to questions.
Yeah, sure. So my son, I'm going to tell you the birth story of my son who turned 17 in a few weeks. So I was pregnant. I was 33 years old. It was 2005. I was living in Denver, Colorado. This was not a planned pregnancy. We were only married for maybe 2 months, and I was pregnant. And so initially I was a little devastated because I didn't think I was ready. Having a baby really wasn't something that I had dreamed about. So the pregnancy itself, I was nauseous the whole time. first, second, third trimester. And I was also working part-time in the evenings at a community corrections facility. So basically a halfway house, and there was no AC. Okay. There were fans. Okay. And it was hot in these classrooms. Right. And so I would go towards the end, the third trimester, every week you're going, right, to see your doctor. Right. So I was just at 38 weeks, and I drove myself to my doctor's office, and they do the regular exam, and my one doctor comes in and he checks my blood pressure, checks my heart rate. He goes, did you drive here? I said, yeah. He goes, okay. And then they finished the exam and they rechecked my blood pressure and my heart rate. He goes, let's just lie you down over here on this sofa for a few minutes. And I was thinking, what the heck's going on, And I'm just lying there by myself on this big recliner, pretty much in a closet, right? It wasn't an exam room, and they kept coming by and checking on me. And it was never like, it was just like, I have no idea why they're so worried about me. I'm sitting there thinking, why are they so worried about me? And after about 10 minutes, he came back and he checked my blood pressure again. Keep in mind, this is a Friday afternoon. He said, I need you to go to the hospital and get admitted. So basically what was happening is my blood pressure before getting pregnant was always naturally low most of my life, right? It gradually crept up throughout the pregnancy, right? Like at one point, mid-pregnancy, it was normal, right? And then it remained kind of normal, even though it rose a little bit. But apparently I was suffering preeclampsia. So it's pregnancy-related high blood pressure. And so he said, yeah, we need you to just drive to the hospital. And the hospital from his office was, I don't know, a couple miles. So I get my car. I'm just like, I don't have a bag. I don't have anything. I didn't even pack a bag, right? I mean, I was only 38 weeks. I mean, my due date wasn't for 10 more days. So I have a little flip phone. This is 2005. I have my flip phone. I, call my husband and I say, yeah, the doctor wants me to, I'm headed to the hospital. Apparently, there's this thing called preeclampsia. I didn't really understand the seriousness of what was happening to me. Because leading up to, my labor, I had read some books. I did the hospital classes. My husband did the whole new daddy boot camp, and I still had a couple classes left. I wasn't supposed to be going to the hospital yet, right? And I think the classes that I missed was about, the birth plan and what to take to the hospital. I didn't take that class, so I didn't know what the heck was going on. So I get to the hospital, and amazingly, my husband meets me in the parking lot. Like he must have just sped to the hospital. And, we just walk in, we explain who we are, and there were no beds. This is the middle of August in Denver. It's hot. And apparently this happens every August, right? Women go into preterm labor, right? So they they found a closet for me and a bed, and I was like, my legs were hanging out in the hallway, right? So, but anyhow, they hooked me up to the baby monitor and the heart monitor for me, and they continue to monitor me. So for nearly 48 hours, they monitored me. My blood pressure was not stabilizing. And Saturday night was when they told me that they were going to have to do an emergency C-section. And at that point, my doctors were there, right? Because the OB office that I that I was a part of, it had more than one doctor, right? So the first doctor was a female doctor, and I was familiar with her, and she explained things to me, and my husband was there, and I was just like, yeah, okay, we got to do what we've got to do, right? And I hadn't read anything about C-sections. I was just like I said, I was waiting for that next class. Like, I was just like, okay, so I guess, I didn't need, I'll be honest with you, like, I didn't even know, what the recovery for a C-section was, like what to expect. And I'm really glad that I didn't know, because in those moments of, everyone saying, if we don't do this, you could die or your baby could die, I just decided that I need to just trust these people, right? And they're the professionals. They know what they're doing. They're not going to let anything bad happen to me. That actually kept going through my head. I recall in the moments, relax, just stay calm. Like, there's nothing to fear. Everything's going to be okay. And I remember just repeating that to myself, right? And yeah, so I was admitted Friday afternoon around 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And then Sunday morning at 6 a.m., my son was delivered. And so the way it worked for me, and I don't know if it worked the same way for you, but they basically put my body in a T shape with my arms stretched out. There was a curtain in front of me, so I couldn't see below my neck. And my arms were strapped to, like, they were held down. I was strapped down. So I couldn't move my arms. Like, I couldn't lift my arms. They were held. And I just remember I couldn't see my son. My husband was behind me. He was peeking over the curtain so he could see our son. And they walked our son around. And the only thing that I could touch before they took him to the incubator, or whatever they call it, was we touched noses. Like, and my husband got to carry him to the NICU, because when I guess it was just the policy of the hospital at the time that when a child is born via C-section, they immediately go into the NICU for at least like 24 hours, right?
Right.
So I didn't feed my baby for the first time. My husband did. I was like pretty much drugged up and not aware of anything. And it really took me until 12 hours afterwards, after he was born, before I was actually even able to do the breastfeeding. And I just remember this lactation specialist kept coming into the room. At this point, I had a room, thank goodness, but it was tiny. And I was the only person in the room. The lactation specialist kept coming in and saying, I think it's time we tried to latch on. We see if the baby can latch on. I said, no, not right now. And so the third time I was just like, all right, already. Like, so
Yeah.
They brought the baby in, they brought my son in. And as I was bringing him to my breast, the lactation specialist said something like, it's okay, because usually, boys, it's harder with boys, and he's so tiny, because my son was really tiny. And I'm thinking, oh, just shut up. I didn't want to hear it. And like, I know my son can do this. And sure enough, he latched on like that. And she goes, oh, I guess you don't need me. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, like, we don't need you. Go away. Leave me alone. Stop bugging me.
Yeah.
Because I think that was one of my biggest fears. Like, I didn't have a vaginal birth. At least he's going to breastfeed. I'm going to breastfeed him. Right.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't breastfed. None of my sisters were breastfed. We were born in the 60s and 70s. That wasn't a cool thing to do back then. That was when formulas were popular, right? In the US. So no one was supporting me with the breastfeeding. My mother, no one was supporting me. But I missed that class too. I missed the breastfeeding class.
Yeah.
But it all worked out okay.
It all works out okay.
Yeah.
So it was similar for me with the breastfeeding, where that was something I didn't know. My son didn't latch. I didn't know C-sections can make it harder on breastfeeding. So that was something new. What was your postpartum like? Did you have any issues or?
I didn't have any issues, I'll be honest. There was one night when I woke up in the middle of the night when he was crying to feed him. And I just felt like I can't do this. And some dark thoughts went through my mind. And I was just like, no, you just have to snap out of this. Stop it. Right. So I wouldn't say it was a piece of cake. Those those fears did creep in. Like, I don't think I can do this. Like, am I really cut out to be a mother? You know, can I really take care of this child? You know, this is just, it, you know, and so luckily I recognized it, and I just said to myself, just do the best you can,
Right.
you know, and don't
Right.
try to be super mom, you know, and you know, luckily my son didn't need a super mom, because over the years he proved that he like wanted to take care of himself. He even takes his own temperature. You know, he's just like, get away, mom. You don't know what you're doing. Okay.
What was it like when you go to the hospital? I mean, when you got to the doctor and they're saying, this is it, like you have to give birth now. And how do you think you just didn't even process anything till afterwards? Because you were just going through the motions?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, I mean, I really don't remember the conversation I had with my husband at the time, but I said, when I called him, I do remember him saying something, really? This is it? Yeah, this is it. Meet me at the hospital. I'm driving over there now. I don't know what to expect. I don't know where to go. We didn't know anything. And I'm
Right.
usually the planner. You know, I'm usually a planner. You know, I like to have things organized, and I
Right.
just was not ready for this. I wasn't. But then,
Right.
like I said, I just had to surrender. I didn't use those words, right? That wasn't the word I used. It was more like, I need to trust these people. They know what they're doing. They
Right.
give birth, they birth babies all the time.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. Well, I hope this was helpful for everyone. If you have questions for Paula, for Ritika, for myself on anything you've heard today, send us an email, and I'll reach out to the ladies to see if they can answer anything for you. But kind of, I'd say, the takeaway, a few key takeaways is, you can't plan, clearly sometimes, no matter how much of a planner you are. The goal is to have a healthy baby. That's the most important thing. And that, it's hard. It's hard after you give birth. We've all had different versions of difficulty, some during pregnancy, some after pregnancy. But we're all in it together. We're all feeling similar emotions. So I didn't feel instant bonding with my son when he was born, and apparently that's a normal thing. So it just, as you go through the process, remember, we're all going through some version of it, and it connects us. So yes, thank you for joining us, and thank you to Paula and Ritika for sharing your stories and experiences. We will be back next month with some more birth stories. Till then, bye.